Salutations from Brittany, France. I'd like to take a minute to thank the organizers and hosts of the first Homos exhibition and of this symposium for their important work and for inviting me to participate. This chance to share research about our heritage and to experience queer community through art is more meaningful today than ever. I wish I could be there with you in person to celebrate and dialogue. I'm with you in spirit, and I'm grateful for the technologies that enable us to surmount obstacles and cross frontiers to come together. Now, let's get down to it. About lesbian image makers of the 19th century. Revolutionary developments in the realms of civil rights and image making accompanied the emergence of both the lesbian and the woman artist as recognizable demographics in the 19th century in Europe and the United States. The ascent of the first feminist movements, the opening of art academies to women, and the democratization of photography converged to create new conditions of possibility. Women's access to the means of self-representation was paramount. Appearing together in portraiture was one way that lesbians with the means to commission or create portraits signified and sanctified their same-sex bonds. This painting of the actress Sarah Bernhardt and the artist Louise Abema on the lake in the Bois de Boulogne, with its impressive scale, it's 5 feet high by 6.5 feet wide, was calculated to attract attention in a museum or gallery setting. The work, in effect, monumentalized Abema's relationship with Bernhardt. At the same time, the painting naturalized the relationship by way of the natural setting. Of course, it's a landscaped park, but it looks natural. And also by way of Abema's naturalist style. Abema is the figure in black with her face profiled against a red parasol. Note the natty man-tailoring of her costume. This unfeminine clothing and no-nonsense hairdo align this woman with the feminist dress reform movement gaining momentum internationally during the late 19th century. Abema's no-frills attire in this and other portraits picturing her contributes to the codification of a modern look cultivated by emancipated women of her generation, many of them lesbians. Abema's gaze directs our gaze toward Bernhardt, every bit the femme fatale, seated at the boat's prow. Clearly the star of the painting, Bernhardt twists her corsage-adorned bust toward the viewer, her right arm, theatrically gesturing across the bowsprit, calls attention to a mated pair of black swans. These elegant creatures, rare in comparison with other fowl on the lake, rhyme with the equally remarkable couple in the boat. Abema made numerous portraits of Bernhardt, and Bernhardt, a talented visual artist herself, reciprocated. In 1875, they collaborated to create a plaster mold of their interlaced hands, which was then cast in bronze. The hands, emblematic of artistic creation as well as lesbian eroticism, sacralized the interlacing of their creative and romantic lives. The sculpture appears centrally in a photograph by the photojournalist Thérèse Bonny, taken in Abema's home shortly after Bernhardt's death in 1923. The interlaced hands, which you see here, share a privileged position on the mantle along with the bust of Abema, sculpted by Bernhardt. And here we see the bust again. Both Abema and Bernhardt were keenly aware of the camera's potential to commemorate liaisons, to construct artistic personas, to enhance careers, and to challenge social norms. Bernhardt had famously posed for the photographer Achille Melandri in an immaculate man-tailored suit beside the pedestal where she was working on Abema's bust. There's nothing accidental about the lesbian affirmative scenes that Bernhardt and Abema staged for their photographers' visits. The photo of Bernhardt in the act of creating Abema's bust was commercialized by the photographer, printed as a cabinet card, mounted enlargement, and displayed in the window of his studio with portraits of other celebrities. Bernhardt's lesbian fans were undoubtedly among the clients who made this portrait a top seller. An international celebrity and one of the first to capitalize on photographic images, Sarah Bernhardt modeled possibilities of creative freedom, sexual freedom, and self-determination for women. These possibilities included the formation of sexual and emotional relationships between women. In the last 2 decades of the 19th century, feminists demanded rights and freedoms on behalf of a widening cross-section of women. In Europe and the United States, under pressure from an increasingly powerful feminist movement, educational opportunities, including formal education in the arts, expanded for women during this period. Not all women artists credentialed by the fine arts academies that were finally open to them committed to careers as painters or sculptors. Some went on to embrace photography, a new technology rapidly becoming widely accessible by the late 1800s. In Europe and the United States, the evolution of photography coincided with feminist challenges to the prevailing gender system as innovations streamlined the photographic technology and made it more affordable. Women entered the photographic arena in escalating numbers. Influential professionals on the international scene included more than a few lesbians. Frances Benjamin Johnston, whose partner, Mattie Edwards Hewitt, was a successful photographer as well, openly advocated photography as a vocation suitable for women. After her return to the United States from Paris, where she had studied at the Académie Julian, Johnston embraced the dual vocation of professional photographer and photojournalist. Portraits of celebrities and dignitaries constitute a major portion of Johnston's professional portfolio. And you can see examples displayed here on the mantle in the background of this self-portrait as a kind of signifier of Johnston's identity. With Hewitt, Johnston also staged more playful, non-commercial photographs. In this one, Johnston sports form-fitting trousers, a waistcoat, a tailored jacket, a tam o' shanter, and a fake mustache, while posing alongside an obsolete high-wheeled bicycle. In the 1890s, when this picture was taken, the bicycle was widely embraced by women as both a vehicle and an emblem of mobility. It was also implicated in the feminist dress reform movement. Since the prevailing feminine fashions, long skirts, corsets, a bustle, made riding a bike impossible, women cyclists donned bloomers or wore trousers beneath their skirts. The portrait of Johnson in male drag standing beside a bicycle whose handlebars reach the level of her chest, makes it clear that such high-wheeled vehicles were not designed with women's clothing in mind, not even dress reform clothing. We can well imagine how the loose fabric of the new woman's cycling bloomers could catch catastrophically in the high-wheeled bike's spokes. The safety bicycle, invented in the 1880s and industrially produced in the 1890s, unleashed a cycling craze around the Western world that captivated both men and women. The feminist icon Susan B. Anthony, who sat for her portrait, in fact, in Johnston's studio, considered the more woman-friendly safety bicycle an important factor in women's fight for equal rights. The same could be said of the increasingly accessible modern camera. Johnston's articles for Ladies' Home Journal in the 1880s and early 1900s, such as the one titled "What a Woman Can Do with a Camera," explain why photography as a profession should appeal particularly to women. These articles offered practical advice to women aspiring to achieve artistic and financial success in the new field as well. Amateur and semi-professional photographers contributed to the influx of women attracted to the vocation at the turn of the century. Alice Austin, an independently wealthy, self-taught photographer who lived in Staten Island, New York, made her life and relationships with other women the focus of a prodigious oeuvre that includes private works as well as pictures of a public nature commissioned principally by friends and friends of friends. This is another one of the private works. Both Austin's private works and her commercial works contribute to the elaboration of visual codes like the cigarette, the bicycle, and unfeminine attire that made lesbianism and women's liberation legible. They also preserve a record of the existence of lesbian friendship circles. Austin, to illustrate her friend Violet Ward's bicycling for ladies, photographed another member of their circle, the gymnast Daisy Elliott, demonstrating proper and improper positions to assume on a bike. Ward, the author, was the president of a women's bicycle club on Staten Island. Wherever photographic technologies were available, the camera offered women opportunities to shape new images of themselves, to create new histories, and give form to new social relations and networks. Lesbianism and feminism often set the stage for women's engagement with the new medium, and photography studios operated by lesbians, and in some cases lesbian couples, were not uncommon. In addition to Johnston and Hewitt, whose studio was in Washington, D.C., I want to point out two other examples of studios established by lesbian couples. The Elvira studio in Munich, Germany, founded by Sophia Gautsticker and Anita Augsburg in 1887, and then the studio opened in 1895 by Bolette Berg and Maria Hø in Horten, Norway. To start with Elvira, as you can see, this studio, Elvira, was designed with high visibility in mind, not the most discreet facade on the block. Sophia Gautsticker, the first female state-licensed photographer in Germany, and her lover, Anita Augsburg, conceived of Elvira as a hub of the German women's movement and a meeting place for the Munich lesbian community, as well as a portrait studio. Note that all four women in this Elvira tableau, identified as students, brandish cigarettes, and they conspicuously light each other. In this group portrait of militant feminists, the pencil is the operative trope, emblematizing the quest for representation and political agency that formed the basis of the subject's group identity. Like Elvira, the studio founded by the Norwegians Bolette Berg and Maria Hø specialized in portraiture. And like Gaudsticker and Augsburg, Berg and Hø were militant feminists. And I'd also like to add that they too had a sort of private oeuvre and a more public facing a business. In addition to the portraits that ensured their livelihood, the couple developed a non-commercial sideline in their free time. Using props and painted backdrops, they staged irreverent scenes featuring themselves, family members, and friends at play with the codes of gender. In one example, Marie Hø and Bolette Berg appear together knee to knee in a stage prop rowboat. The setup brings to mind Louisa Bema's contemporaneous double portrait with Sarah Bernhardt posing in a skiff on the lake in the Bois de Boulogne. Here, however, the gender play is tongue-in-cheek. Hø, sporting male attire and giving the camera her best butchy glare, holds the rowboat's oars, while Berg, decked out in feminine finery, leans back against the stern and gazes admiringly at her. The stagey backdrop evokes a woodland setting. A ground cloth bunched around the hull of the rowboat enables us to imagine a turbulent stream. The couple's hands, clearly visible, display what appear to be identical rings. Although Hø and Berg's tableau does not aspire to the grandiosity of Bema's double portrait with Bernhardt, nor does it manifest an ambition to naturalize the same-sex scenario, the photograph nonetheless immortalizes a lesbian love story. The practices of lesbian image makers varied widely, as we have seen. Yet it is possible to come to certain general conclusions. Feminist demands for political and economic autonomy created a favorable climate for lesbian artists and photographers. Further, the allure for lesbians of the camera, a signifier of agency, seeing, and being seen, makes perfect sense at a time when women had little public presence and women loving women had no visibility. In the 19th century, the very existence of lesbians was not widely acknowledged. Lesbianism was denied by lawmakers who feared that explicitly outlawing lesbian sexual practices would have the perverse effect of promoting them. Lesbianism was misunderstood by sexologists, doctors, and psychologists as a failed or ersatz form of heterosexuality. Heirs expunged traces of lesbianism from their family photo albums and family histories. Signs of lesbian in art, theater, or literature were censored. These campaigns of effacement helped to explain why lesbian photographers, as well as many of their sisters in the fine arts, privileged the practice of portraiture, a genre that manifests and validates the existence of individuals, couples, groups, communities, and networks. In portraiture, lesbians elaborated the codes of identity that made them recognizable to one another and determined the conditions of their own visibility. 19th century lesbian portraiture makes a claim that may seem self-evident to us. We exist. At the time, and we would do well to consider how this resonates within our political context today, such acts of self-representation were nothing short of revolutionary. Thank you.